So for today, I thought of covering two topics. The first one is a small topic. It's just an extension of what Jagdish was covering on Monday. I thought I'll talk about it a bit more on in the context of where to use and what sort of benefits we derive from the 2x2 matrix. Okay. Then we look into this concept of linear regression. Okay. The topic of linear regression I picked it because it is the most basic of the data analytics techniques, and since all of us are working in an analytics company, I believe it is quite imperative for us to know what it is and have a basic understanding of it. Okay. So I'll first talk about an example application of where we use this 2x2 matrix. Okay. And this comes from my previous experience. Okay. So I was previously working with an e-commerce company, and I was with the warehouse operations team. Okay. And this was the situation. So we needed to identify spots where the picked up products can be consolidated quickly. Okay. So these spots are called as pick zones. Okay. So typically the e-commerce companies have very big warehouses. Okay. Even a normal sized warehouse will measure 1 lakh square foot of area in space. Okay, so lakhs and lakhs of products will be stored inside that warehouse. So whenever you order that product in the website, what happens is a particular product in a particular warehouse will be reserved for you. Okay, and that product will be stored up on a particular shelf. And what happens is the guy who is working in the warehouse, he will have a handheld device, and that order will be registered on that handheld device. So once the order comes, what he does is he goes to that shelf where your item is stored, and then he picks up the product from that shelf and then drops that product in a place called the drop zone. Okay. So now what happens is, usually there is a very long time taken to travel to a particular shelf, pick up an item and bring it for dispatch. Okay. And this speed of picking up is very, very critical, especially during the sales season. Okay. So now this being the case, we measure something called as a manpower productivity in the warehouse. Okay. And our objective here was we needed to identify certain areas where this travel time was having a negative impact on the productivity. Okay. So it's like something like since the worker has to travel a long time after picking up the product and bringing it to the dispatch area, can we have something like a separate drop zone nearby to the pick zone so that this travel time is reduced and thereby the productivity is increased. Okay. So what I did was I came up with two measures of this manpower productivity. Okay. So one was productivity with travel time and the other was productivity without travel time. Okay. And for each pick zone, so pick zone is nothing but the area of the warehouse in which the items are stored. So it is nothing but a collection of shelves. Okay. So each spot that you see here in the scatter plot is a particular pick zone.
Okay. So, Sai, just a quick question.
Yes.
So what did you mean by productivity without the travel time? What does it mean?
I'll tell you.
Okay.
So what happens is usually the warehouse layouts, right? So it is prepared using the CAD software, like the computer-aided designing tools, and we have an estimate of how much time it takes to travel from each pick zone or from each shelf to the product dropping area, and also the distance from that pick zone to the product dropping area. Okay, so using this we can calculate the so we can measure the time taken to travel from that picking area to the dropping area. Okay, so the productivity with travel time is nothing but the time taken to pick up the product from that shelf and travel from that shelf to the drop zone. Productivity without travel time is just the time taken to go and pick up that product from the shelf. It does not include that time taken to travel to the drop zone. Does that answer the question, Chaitanya?
No, so thank you. So what I'm trying to understand is, see, essentially we are trying to measure and reduce the travel time. That's what we are trying to do, right? So when we say,
so or we are trying to just identify spots where this travel time is high.
Okay. Okay. So see, if you have like, so I would assume this is how it is happening. So just correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, I have no understanding
Right.
or
Yeah.
experience in this, right? So, so basically, if you take, so you have a specific, let's say, order that you get. Okay.
Right.
Let us say you get, let us say, you get a, let's say, mouse. Okay, and a few pens. Okay.
Right.
So mouse is probably there in a location where you have computer access. I'm just assuming.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And there is another place where is stationary. Okay.
Yes.
And what this person has to do is, has to go to, this place where the mice are there. Okay. Pick up a mouse. Okay. Go to another place, pick up, the pens. Okay. And then he or she would just drop them in the a box, right? That's the whatever, I don't know what you call it, maybe drop zone or something like that, right? So here, so tell me what's the difference between productivity with the travel time and without the travel time?
So in these cases, what happens is whenever the order contains items from two different zones, we send two different people to those zones. So it's like one guy will be in charge of only the electronics area, the one other guy will be in charge of only the stationery area.
Okay.
So when the order contains two different items, the stationery guy will get the order for the pen, and the electronics guy will get the order for the mouse.
Okay.
And both of them will pick up items, though they belong to the same order. It will be picked up by two different people, and they will be brought to the drop zone, where then it will be combined together.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay.
So travel time will just be the time taken by each person to travel from the pick zone to this dropping point.
Okay, got it. Again, I'm trying to understand what these numbers are. When you say productivity with the travel time and without the travel time, so how do you measure these here?
Yeah, so productivity is measured as number of items picked per hour, right? Okay. So the numerator for both the metrics will be the same, number of items picked. The denominator in the first productivity without the travel time is nothing but just time taken by the person to go to that particular shelf and pick that product up, because there's some amount of activity involved in this, because once the order comes in the handheld device, he has to search in which section of the shelf it is placed, which aisle it is placed, and so on.
Right.
And then so let's say a mouse, right? It will be in a big box, and that box will have a lot of other models of mice as well, and he has to search through that box and then pick up that particular mouse and scan it with that handheld device and so on. So this will constitute the picking time.
Okay.
And then once he picks up that item, he has to travel from there to that drop zone, and this travel time is what we call as the travel time. Now for this particular metric, the productivity without the travel time, the denominator is just the time taken to pick up that item from that box.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah, so productivity with travel time is denominator is the time taken to pick up that item plus the time taken to travel after picking up that item to the drop zone.
Okay.
Yeah. So for each of those storage zones, we calculate this productivity with the travel time and without the travel time, and we plot them as XY coordinates on this graph. Okay. Now, so we have certain benchmarks of productivity. So when we say that the productivity is greater than 85 items per hour, it is high. If it is less than 85 items per hour, it is low, something like that. So we have certain benchmarks, and based on that, we make this categorization of each zone, whether the productivity with and without the travel time is low or high. Okay, and now this quadrant that you see, right? So these are the problematic zones, because the productivity due to there is low productivity due to high travel time. What do I mean by that? See, if you don't include the travel time, that is the productivity without the travel time is very, very high. Okay, but if you include the travel time, the productivity becomes very low. Okay, so for these areas that we have in this particular quadrant, we can say that the productivity is impacted because there's a long time involved in traveling after picking the product and coming to the dropping zone. Okay, so in each warehouse, what we do is we have this as a metric. So what is the percentage of storage locations which fall under this this orange colored quadrant, the high with productivity without travel time and low productivity with travel time? So what is the percentage of locations that fall under this quadrant? Okay, and if any warehouse has a very high percentage of zones falling under this category, then we pull up that warehouse manager and tell him that, hey, your warehouse has a serious deficit of dropping zones, which and most of the dropping zones are located very far off from your storage locations. So please change the layout of the warehouse so that your productivity is improved, because only when the productivity is improved, the warehouse throughput will be improved, and only when that happens, you get that faster delivery. Okay, so when you are performing operations at an all India level, dispatching lakhs and lakhs of products daily, the speed becomes very essential. Okay, and in e-commerce today, they have something like a same day delivery, next day delivery, and so on, right? In order to achieve those targets, this sort of a metric becomes very, very important. So this is one real-time example of where I have used this kind of a 2x2 matrix to arrive at a particular recommendation. So this is how we always talk about data-driven insights and data-driven recommendations, right? So this is the sort of recommendations that you give. You do this kind of an analysis, and you say that very specifically, you will be able to say for each warehouse, hey, these 4 are the locations where your travel time is very high, and this is the location which is impacting your productivity. So please see to it that you fix the layout of these zones. Okay, so this is one real-time example. Any questions? Okay.
Maybe a quick addition.
All right. So let's move on to the next topic of the day. Like I said, the linear regression, right? It is a very, very important concept, and it is the most basic statistical modeling technique. Okay. In fact, I wouldn't even go as far as to say that this is a machine learning technique. This is something that is used even by everyday statisticians. People who don't know machine learning also use linear regression. Okay. And when I say a modeling technique, what do you mean by the word model? Model is nothing but a equation. Okay, it's just a fancy way of saying an equation. All right. And what we do in this linear regression is we have something called as a dependent variable or the target variable. Okay. So this dependent variable is modeled as a function of one or more independent variables. All right. So usually this is the notation that we use for this linear regression. Y is equal to f of x. I'll give you some examples. Okay. So what do I mean when I say y is equal to f of x? So for example, so y is the target variable and x is the predictor variable or the independent variable. Okay. Now y could be something like the number of umbrellas sold. Okay. And this number of umbrellas sold can be a function of the rainfall that occurs in centimeter. Okay. Similarly, the number of marks scored by a student could be a function of the number of hours studied. And if let's say we are to model the price of a particular car, okay, so that could be a function of several parameters. So the CC engine displacement and CC dimensions of the car, materials and the parts used in the car, and so on. Okay, so this is the basic idea or the structure of the linear regression model. Okay, so there are two forms of this linear regression, where the basic form is the simple linear regression, which is like this particular model, y is equal to mx plus c. This is the equation of a straight line. Okay, the simple linear regression is where we have only one independent variable, only this one particular x variable. So like the first two examples that you see here. So x here is rainfall in centimeter. The second example, x is number of hours studied. And this is the equation of a line. And the other form of the linear regression is what we call as the multiple linear regression, which is like m1x1 plus m2x2 up to mn(xn), like based on how many coefficients do you have in your data. So for example, if you see the third example here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 x variables, right? So this will be m1x1 plus m2x2 plus m3x3 plus m4x4 plus the c. And this is what we call as the hyperplane equation. Now if I am to just elaborate a bit on the notations, like I told you, y is what we call as the dependent variable or the target variable. X is what we call as the independent variable or the predictor variables. So this could be one or multiple depending on what sort of a linear regression you want to follow. M is the slope. So change in y for unit change in x. So in mathematical form, this is represented as dy by dx, and you might be familiar with the term. So M is the slope, and C is the y-intercept. Okay. So this is on the notations. Now, before using linear regression on any particular data set, there are certain assumptions that you have to follow. Okay. So the first assumption is the linearity regression. Linearity assumption. Now, like the name says, so the name itself has the word linear, right? So the most fundamental assumption of the linear regression technique is that there should be a linear relationship between the dependent variable and each independent variable. Okay. So for example, what do you mean by a linear relationship? So let's say you plot the number of umbrellas sold on the y-axis. So this is the y variable. You plot the number of umbrellas sold on the y-axis, and then you plot this rainfall in centimeter on the x-axis. Okay, you will get a scatter plot. Okay, so that's what I mentioned here. Checked using scatter plot. Okay, and by looking at that scatter plot, we can calculate something called as a correlation coefficient, and we can identify whether those two variables are having a positive correlation or a negative correlation, or how strongly or weakly are they correlated. Okay, so only when there's this kind of a linear relationship between the dependent and the independent variables, you can use the linear regression. For example, if the other type of relationship could be something like a polynomial relationship or an exponential relationship. So in these sorts of data, the line that you draw in your scatter plot will not be a perfectly straight line, it will be a curved line. Okay, so for those sorts of data, you will not be able to use this linear regression technique. Okay, and the next assumption is the normality assumption. That is where we say variables should follow a normal distribution. By normal distribution, what I mean is it's also called as a Gaussian distribution or a bell curve distribution. Okay, and this is done by plotting the distribution. You can visually plot the distribution of each variable and see whether it is normal, or there are also certain tests, statistical tests that you can perform. So for example, there is this test called Shapiro-Wilks test for normality. You can do that, and that will tell you whether your data follows a normal distribution. And the next assumption is that there should not be a relationship between two independent variables. Okay, this condition where the independent variables are correlated, we call this condition as the multicollinearity. Okay, so the relationship should only be between the dependent and the independent variables. There should not be relationship between the independent variables within themselves. Okay, so that if that relationship exists, we call it as a multicollinearity condition, and this is checked by using a metric called as the variance inflation factor, or VIF. Okay, there's another crude way of doing this. So once you do that linear regression, we have certain metrics to evaluate the performance of that linear regression model. Okay, and one of them is called as R square. So if there is a multicollinearity, that R square will shoot up something like 0.98 or 0.99. When that happens, you can say that there is probably multicollinearity in the data. Okay, but the correct way to, or the exact way to determine whether there is multicollinearity in the model is to use this metric called as the variance inflation factor.
Hey, how do you check that, Sai? Where do you get the variance inflation factor?
Most of the, in fact, all the statistical software packages have that function, Chaitanya, the VIF function.
Okay.
And I think if the value of this VIF is greater than 2, then it implies that there is a very high multicollinearity.
Okay, so you use the function, feed the data, and you get the result, and then you check. Is that how it is?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Okay.
And then the next assumption is something called as the homoscedasticity. Okay, this is where we say the different values of the target variable should have the same variance in their errors. Okay, so what do I mean by this? So for example, let's say you are predicting the expenditure based on the income. Okay, and let's say there are two groups in your data. So you have a high income group and a low income group. Okay. The errors that you get after your prediction should be the same for both these high income group as well as the low income groups. It should not be like for the high income groups your model predicts very well, there is very low error, but for the low income groups there's a very huge error. Okay, so if that happens, then that is called as heteroscedasticity. So your errors of the target variable, that variance should be uniform. Okay, so this condition is what is called as homoscedasticity, and this is also one of the assumptions for the linear regression. And for homoscedasticity also we have a test called as the Levin's test. So this test gives you something called as a p-value, and using you follow the same procedure. You feed in the data. So all statistical software packages have functions for this test also. You feed in the data into this function, and so that value will determine whether or not there is homoscedasticity in the data. So typically when you use so this linear regression can be performed either using Microsoft Excel itself, or you can use some other software such as R or Python. The advantage of using R or Python is that it also allows you to do these kinds of tests, the normality test, the VIF test, or the homoscedasticity test. In Excel doesn't have built-in functions for these advanced tests. So that is the advantage of using a statistical software package as opposed to Microsoft Excel. And of course, there's always the advantage of working with huge data sets, which you don't get in Excel. Okay. So how do we exactly do this linear regression? So this is how the mechanics of it works. Okay. So there's a method called as the ordinary least squares method, or OLS method. Okay. And typically this is how this method works, but in reality we don't follow these steps one by one. So that's why we have computers to do the job for us, right? So when you feed in the data into your Excel or R or Python or whatever, this is what it runs in the background. Okay, so what it does is it will plot the X and Y coordinates on a graph. So for example, we have the rainfall in centimeter on the X-axis, the number of umbrellas sold on the Y-axis. Right? So for each X and Y value, it will plot the coordinates on the graph, and then it will draw a line. You can draw any line. Okay, this process is iterative. So let's say for the first iteration, it draws this particular line. Okay, and what it does is it will measure the distance from each point to this line. Okay, so distance between this point and this line, distance between this point and this line, distance between this point and this line, and so on. So it like this, it will measure these distances. Once it measures these distances, what it does is it will square these distances, and then it will sum up these squares. Okay, so that is what so ordinary least squares, right? So the word squares refers to this step number 4. So it will measure the distance, it will square those distances, and then it will sum up those squares. Okay, and then these steps, that is the drawing the line and measuring the distance, squaring the distance. So these steps will be repeated by drawing multiple lines through this coordinates. This is just one of the lines, right? So like this, maybe I can have one more line like this, one more line like this. I can have so many different lines over here in this space. So it will draw all those possible lines, and then for each of those lines, it will repeat these steps 3 to 5. So it will measure the distances, square them, and add them up. Okay, and it will choose that particular line for which the value in step 5, that is the sum of these squares, is the minimum. So that particular line for which the sum of squares is minimum will be chosen as the regression line. The other name for this regression line is called as the line of best fit. So why do we call it the line of best fit? It is because all these points collectively are located closest to that particular line than to any other line. So that is why we called it as the line of best fit. And that line, the equation of that line, that which you choose, the step 7, is the linear regression model, or the linear regression equation. Okay. Any questions here until now?
So here we have one independent variable and one target variable. For assuming a case like where we have 2 or 3 independent variable and one target variable, will you go for 3D or like how the plot looks like?
So that is something that cannot be visualized. That is why they call it as a hyperplane. So here, the example that I showed you was for the simple linear regression, which is taking the equation of a line. For this, they call it as a hyperplane, which cannot be visualized in a two-dimensional space.
Okay. And coming to the real-time scenario, like here we have so much condition normality and this non-multi collinearity and all. So in the real-time data, like, is it possible will all these assumptions match, or in that case, what we will do? The assumptions.
It is not always possible that all of those assumptions are satisfied. In case those assumptions are not satisfied, then that is when we choose a different technique. So, for example, you can go ahead with a polynomial regression, or an exponential regression, or you can use some other advanced machine learning technique like a neural network or random forest or decision tree and so on.
Okay, thanks.
In fact, I myself have used polynomial regression once. So that works a little bit differently. So there you have to model a polynomial of the order of degree 2 or degree 3 or degree 4 or whatever. So whichever suits your data best. That is also something that that you can do in Excel or Python. Maybe I'll cover that in one of the upcoming sessions.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Right. Okay. Okay. So now we have worked through the mechanics of that model. We have built this regression line and so on. Okay. And what do we do finally? So we measure the accuracy of the model. Okay. So accuracy is nothing but how close or how far are your predictions from the actual data. Right? So we measure the accuracy. And then there is one more important metric that we measure, which is called as the coefficient of determination. Okay. And this is defined as the amount of variance in the target variable explained by the predictor variable. Okay. And typically this the software packages that we have today, be it Excel or any other thing, they represent this in the form of R squared and adjusted R squared. Okay. So what this R squared means, so you'll typically get something like R squared is equal to 0.65. Okay. So what it means is 65% of the variance in the target variable is explained by the predictor variable or the variables, depending on what sort of regression you use. Okay. And there are two types of this R squared value. So one is called as R squared and other is called as adjusted R squared. Okay. Now the difference comes when you are going with a multiple linear regression model. So when you have more than one independent variable, that is where you need to make a distinction between this R squared and adjusted R squared. Okay. So when you have this many variables in your model, so for example, you see the third example over here. So let's say you run the first iteration of the linear regression. You model this car price as a function of the CC of the car. Okay. And then the next iteration, you model car price as a function of both the CC as well as the dimensions of the car. Okay. Now assume in your first iteration, you got an R square of 0.65. Okay. In the next iteration, you might have got an R square of 0.70. Okay. And let's say you have a third iteration where you consider the materials also. So that will give you an R square of 0.75. Okay. So like this, as and when you add independent variables additionally to your model, that R square value will keep on increasing. Okay. But the adjusted R square value, which is the second parameter that we have here, this will increase only when the additional variables that you include are statistically significant. Okay. So what do I mean by statistically significant? Only if that predictor variable or the independent variable has an impact, has a real impact on your target, only then the adjusted R square will increase. So for example, we model just using the CC alone, we get an adjusted R square of 0.65. Okay. Then we model using the dimensions. The adjusted R square will increase only if the dimensions have a real impact on the price of that car. Otherwise, it won't increase. Okay. So this is one important distinction that we have to make between the R square and adjusted R square. So always remember, whenever you are using multiple independent variables in your model, please use the adjusted R square to evaluate your model. Okay. So all right, so that is what I had for today, the 2x2 matrix and the concept of linear regression. If we have any questions, we can take them now. Yes, Ram.
So now in slide 6 actually we are measuring the number of amarula soil related to the rain prediction. Okay, so we is it possible to actually if we maybe predict the height of if we toss a coin? Okay, so means linear regression means a prediction only, right? So
Right.
if we toss a coin, shall we measure the height of the different heights by using the
Yes, it is possible. I would say it's a bit tricky to do that. See, so any data science technique, right? Be it linear regression or any advanced machine learning or whatever, it can be used to predict the outcome which you just did. So the height to which the coin goes when it is tossed. Okay, but the primary requirement is we'll first need to have some kind of past historical data on it. So let's say you toss that coin 100 times, and during each of those times you will need to have those measurements of how high it went. Okay, and then the most important parameter would be on what factors does that height depend. So does it depend on your height, the height from which you are tossing that coin, and then you have this acceleration due to gravity, the weight of the coin, diameter of that coin, and so on, right? So you find out a way to record all this stuff, and then you build this linear regression model. Then we will be able to predict the height to which the coin goes.
at that time we have to use multiple linear regression.
Sorry, Shravan, your voice was a bit.
So at that time we will use that m y equals to m1 x1 plus multiple
Yeah,
linear
right, yes. Any other questions? Okay, that's all I had for today.